Alright, we're doing a ranking tier list of all the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. We're going to be covering books 1 through 18, and I won't be covering any of the adjacent books, so like the Rally spin-offs or the movie diary books, just 1 through 18. And also to let you know, I named F tier Loaded Diaper, and I named S tier Fudge Dogs, and if you've read the new book, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, let's do this. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I'm going to give this one an A, mostly for pure nostalgia in all honesty, but I really do think it's a great book. I think the one thing holding it back from an S tier is that Greg is so damn unlikable in this first book and doesn't really seem to learn a big life lesson. Rodi Rules. Alright, this one might be controversial, but I'm going to give it a crisp C. I used to really like this one a whole lot when I was younger, but after rereading it recently, I think it's a really funny book, but the plot is so all over the place and they don't attempt to do anything with Roderick and Greg's relationship. Or even really explore Roderick as a character, so overall, I think it's just okay. The Last Straw. This one's a good, solid B. I think it gives some more insight into the Heffley's home life and how horrible Frank and Susan are as parents, and getting a better understanding of why Greg acts the way he does. Dog Days. This one is another nostalgia one for me, but I think I'll comfortably place it at A. I think the narrative is pretty cohesive, which for early Wimpy Kid books is kind of hard to find, and I like how it sets up the next book. Plus, this is the first book where you see some slight change in Greg's egotism. The Ugly Truth. Easy. Fudge Dogs. This is one of the best Wimpy Kids books, hands down. I love taking Riley away from Greg and him trying to find new friends and realizing just how unlikable he is as a person. And it's the first time the series tries to explore Greg and attempts to dip its toes into more mature subject matter, like aging and finding purpose. Cabin Fever. I love this one. This is another A. I love how tight-knit the plot is, and the comedy is really fun. And I love how they explore how much Greg is mistreated by his family, especially during the holidays, and how he never gets the presents he wants. It really shows how little Susan and Frank know about him, and honestly, how little they care about him. The Third Wheel. Okay, I don't know how most people feel about this book, in fact, most of the Wimpy Kid books, because it seems like everyone's opinions on the series are so diverse, which is fun, because there's a wide discussion to be had. But for me, this gets a nice, juicy, loaded diaper. This book is horrible from start to finish. In fact, it's my least favorite book in the whole series. This book is slightly more cohesive than most Wimpy Kid books at this time, but the plot is so dull. And all this book's mission was to set up the next book, that one being Hard Luck. There is damn near nothing redeemable here for me with this one, because the worst crime of this book is that it's not even funny. Hard Luck. Funny enough, the last book is my least favorite, and this next one, Hard Luck, is my favorite book in the series, hands down. So this one gets a good ol' Fudge Dogs. This is the book where I can tell Jeff got the hand of narrative structure, and from here on out, for the most part, the books are way more cohesive and have better storytelling overall. Earlier Wimpy Kid books strayed away from mature material, and even with The Ugly Truth, they didn't fully commit to the book's themes, and Hard Luck goes all out, trying and succeeding at telling a compelling narrative for Greg. Long Haul is another one of my favorites, and I think is the funniest book in the series, and maybe even the most creative when it comes to setting up scenarios and situations to put Greg through. I love how anxiety-inducing the book is and never lets up on the problems the Heffley family endures while going on this road trip. So, it gets A. Fudge Dog. Old school. I adore this one a lot, and a big reason for that is the transition between the first half of the book and the second. A lot of Wimpy Kid books have a lot of filler in the first half and then give us the actual plot in the last half of the book, which frustrates me a lot because there are some plot lines from books that would have been incredible to see as an entire narrative instead of only 20 to 30% of the book's page count. But this does a great job at having two different plot lines and merging them seamlessly, and then on top of that, gives Frank and Greg a nice little story arc. So I'm going to give it an A. Double Down. Okay, I have a feeling this placement is going to be super controversial. Double Down was a book that disappointed me severely at first. The synopsis of the book is that Greg and Riley attempt to make a scary movie, and in Diary of a Wimpy Kid fashion, the book's description is not the actual narrative. So, when the movie making doesn't happen until the last 30 pages of a 217-page book, I was pretty upset. But then I sat on the book and skimmed it again and then looked at the book from a different point of view. the actual point of view. Because the plot isn't Greg and Raleigh making a movie, it's Greg trying, very desperately might I add, at attempting to find a purpose to his life because his parents are pushing him to do so. But at the same time, they are discouraging everything he attempts to do, so Greg is doubling down on the problems he causes while trying to basically please his parents. Which, if you read between the lines, it's pretty sad, and you see how much of a disappointment Greg is to Susan and Frank. The book also deals with Greg having nightmares and that they are fueled by his anxiety of growing up and having to figure out his path in life. It dives deep into some real mature stuff, so after another read, this book went from something I really did not like to one of my most favorite books in the whole series, which means I will be giving it a Fudge Dogs. This might be my hottest take here, but in all honesty, I'm not really sure. But let me tell you, I cannot wait for the comments on this video. Last note before I move on, I think the description to this one is more off than most of the other books because I don't know how you can really market this one's actual narrative. The Getaway. This book had a great start. The anxiety of a harsh Massachusetts winter storm breaking out when a family of 5 are trying to get onto a plane during the holidays was incredible, and played to Jeff's strengths of building up stressful scenarios. Then they actually get to the resort and the whole book falls apart. It wasn't that funny for the most part, and the plot dragged, so this one gets a D. The Meltdown. I think this book was funny, not one of the funniest or anything, but it had some good laughs, and I loved the big snowball fight ending. But the book treads familiar territory we've seen in Wimpy Kid books all too much, so I'm going to give it a B. Wrecking Ball. This one is great. The pacing is excellent, the narrative was emotionally impactful, and the exploration of Greg and Raleigh's friendship is one that was really touching, especially at the very end. This one gets an A. The Deep End. Probably another controversial take, but I love this book a whole lot. The narrative is extremely cohesive, the humor is some of the best in the series, and there is some nice emotional beats, especially with the ending. But this book does tread familiar territory, but unlike The Meltdown, this book does enough different things to make it stand out, like actually having an emotionally charged story arc for the Heffley family that puts a huge smile on my face. This one is one of my favorites in the whole series, so it gets a Fudge Dogs. Big shot. This one is another one of my all-time favorites from the series. I think it might have the most cohesive plot in the entire franchise. The only other book that might rival that is No Brainer, but this book really connected with me on a relatability level when it comes to Greg's lack of understanding towards sports. And I loved how they tackle the subject matter in this story. The comedy is also some of my favorite in the series, so this one gets, without question, a Fudge Dogs. Diaper overload. I don't think this one's gonna be a hot take. This book was a misfire. At first I didn't really know how to feel about it, but after some time I just had to accept that I did not like this book. I think it was an interesting decision to make Roderick the main character, but the execution was so off. For starters, Greg is not even really present in the book, which was weird beyond belief, and they did nothing with exploring Roderick as a character. Which irritated me even more since Jeff knows people love the Rodi Rules movie over the book because of the emotional elements in that film. And on top of that, Jeff has proven himself very much capable of telling emotionally engaging stories. So I was disappointed that he did nothing with Greg and Roderick's relationship. And overall did nothing with Roderick himself. So this book gets a D. No brainer. Alright, the newest entry into the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series was exceptional. I put out a review, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts, you can check that out. But it seems like most people enjoyed this one, but I have heard a fair amount of criticism. But for me, I loved this one so much. It was another book I related to a whole lot, and I found this one to be one of the funniest books in the series, as well as one of the most cohesive narratively. I really liked how the first half of the book was more realistic in depicting the financial issues of Greg's school. So when you do get to the second half of the book, and it's over the top, I was honestly okay with it because Jeff did the legwork to transition into the absurdity. But I can completely understand why some people can find it unappealing. But for me, it worked. It worked so much for me, I'm giving it a Fudge Dogs. This became one of my favorites in the series. And if you were wondering, the placements of how I aligned the books is my overall placement / ranking. So with that said, my top 5 books in the series are number 1, Hard Luck, 2, The Long Haul, 3, Double Down, 4, No Brainer, and 5, The Deep End. And Big Shot, number 6. It was so close to breaking the top 5. But those are my top 5 favorite books in the whole series. So go ahead and scream at me in the comments down below. But before you do that, I made a little Diary of a Wimpy Kid documentary that covers books 1 through 17 and took me a year to make. And it would mean the world to me if you checked it out, even if it's for 5 to 10 minutes. There are chapters, so you can skip around to see a more in-depth analysis of all the books and Greg Heffley as a whole. So with that said, thank you for watching.